Welcome to another episode of Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 169. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, both from Truth and Facts About Boxing. What's going on, brother?
Hey, what's going on, man? It's all good. Just here to talk boxing.
Indeed. Hang in there. We should have some more folks joining us, but want to actually start the show on time and finish on time. So we're starting the show right now. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, uh, live YouTube show, as well as podcast and blog discussing all things boxing. Motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When boxing is bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns boxing, we will talk about it. If you want to find all information regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, just please go to the blog page. p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com is the link. Check the right of the page. You will see links to our page, on Facebook, G+, Twitter, Tumblr. Also where to listen to us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Player FM, as well as Google Play Music. Let's get the show started this evening, recapping what went down last weekend. Big fight, of course, was Canelo Alvarez fighting Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. out in Vegas. A lot of hype going in, a lot of talk going in. I was always skeptical of this bout because I wondered, what did Chavez Jr. do to deserve this bout? And even though last week I said it should be a good fight if both fighters brought it, the problem is one fighter brought it, the other fighter didn't bring a damn thing. Alvarez winning by comfortable margin, won every round on the books. Chavez Jr., I'm still trying to find out what he was doing in there. And I see Gail from Community Digital News is joining us. We're going to talk specifically the fight, and we'll talk about the news development later on that happened after the fight. But that was highly disappointing. A snoozer, boring. As I was saying before you joined us, Gail, I still don't know what Chavez was doing. I don't know what disappointed me more. The fact that Chavez Jr. brought nothing, or the fact that Canelo didn't really put the pedal to the metal and take this dude out to take us out of our misery of seeing the same mundane thing over and over, round after round after round after round. I go to you first of all. I need answers.
I don't think there are any answers. The only thing is that I just want to say that I wanted to buy Gail's Chavez is the greatest Mexican fighter all shirt that I know she has.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, buddy. Yeah,
I wanted to buy
all
that
day.
shirt now, Gail.
I do understand there's a really nice pair of boxing gloves, hardly used, up for sale on eBay. And the seller habla español, so you might check that out.
Yeah. But you know what? There aren't any answers. Chavez is, remember a while back when I say he's a career fuck up, and this is just another prime example of.
Thank you
Chavez,
very much.
There he is. He's a career fuck up, and this should be the end all to be all, but no, it isn't, because Chavez is talking about how he wants to fight Daniel Jacobs at 168. He wants everyone to see that it was the weight. Well, the problem with that, Chavez, is, guess what? You agreed to the weight. The problem with that, Chavez, is, guess what? You was okay with fighting at that weight. So if it was a money grab for Golden Boy, it was just as big of a money grab for Chavez, because he took $3 million, got in the ring, did absolutely freaking nothing. Like, when people are saying it's worse than Mayweather Pacquiao, when after the fight, they're talking more about the special announcement than talking about you, it says everything you want to know. Chavez should no longer be allowed to even participate in a boxing ring. I don't know why he keeps getting these chances, but there are no answers. There really aren't any answers except for the fact that he is who we think he is. In the words of Scorsese, you your daddy's son. And that's it. He is his daddy. You are your daddy's son. And you not your daddy, you just the son. Because that right there, that's like, I don't know how, even as a father, that's got to be one of those, I want my last name back. So you can't explain that. There's nothing you can explain.
I have no answers. Bo has no answers. Gail, you was at the fight, covering it for Communities Digital News. You was there for a lot of the pre-fight news stuff, the press conferences and whatever. Your perspective at ringside, were the fans, the media, and the interviews you were having with folks on the inside, were they as annoyed, frustrated, pissed off as the rest of us who were watching it on television?
You know, we had that glimmer of hope when at the weigh-in, Chavez came in underweight by a half pound, mind you. He looked pretty good. By all accounts, he'd had the best, most diligent training camp ever in his career. We went into Saturday night thinking, yeah, we might just see something. And once again, just like Charlie Brown, Lucy pulled the football away, and we got a stinky fight. Not just from Chavez Jr. We got a fairly lackluster performance from Canelo. Sure, he dominated on all the cards. He shut it out on all 3 cards, which is not easy to do, folks, to get a 120, 108 card on all 3 cards. Usually the judge throws the guy on the losing end a bone somewhere. You couldn't even do that. He looked like a deer in the headlights. It was horrible. And as the fans realized round after round what was going down in front of their eyes, first of all, a lot of them, about 2/3 of the way through the fight, got up and left the arena. That's a pretty extraordinary way to send a message. The fans also were chanting various soccer chants that I think many of you who've watched Mexican soccer might be familiar with. I'm sure they will not aired on the HBO pay-per-view, or at least not audible. And the fans also, at multiple points during the fight, started chanting "beso, beso," which is kiss, kiss, which means, why don't you just darn well kiss each other? You two are just so friendly, because neither of you seems to want to hit each other. You know, if you had told me that Lucas Matthysse would put on the best fight of the night, I would have thought you were smoking something. And it turned out that's exactly what happened. Matthysse put on a dandy little performance, and Canelo and Chavez stunk out the joint. And you know what? Honestly, we have no one to blame but ourselves. We really don't. Fool me once, fool me twice, you know the rest.
I see Daniel has joined us from the Inscriber on online magazine. I want to focus on the fight specifically, Daniel. We can talk about the breaking news after doing the news segment, but I want to focus on the fight in particular. You watched it live. I know you was on, I believe, on EJ's channel afterwards, discussing what went down. Again, I got questions for Bo. He gave me no answers. I got questions for Gail. She gave me no answers. I need answers, because what the hell was that?
That was, in essence, how to disgrace your family name in 36 minutes. That's what that was. Because Chavez, the only saving grace, okay, there are 2 saving graces technically. First is that he actually made weight. Even though he looked like Skeletor Brandon Rios while doing it. But the only other saving grace is that he didn't quit. But in hindsight, to me, it might have been better if he did quit. Because he just let Canelo just have his way throughout the entire night. You could tell who was the one that had the motivation. You could tell the one who was actually paying attention to the corner. You could tell the one that was actually treating it like a sparring session. Canelo was standing up throughout the entire fight, even between rounds, never sat down. Junior tried that for 1 round, for 1 in between round segment, and then he just sat down afterwards. Like I said, the answer you want to get is number one, the Chavez family, because one thing I did, luckily, and I think Bo hopefully did it as well, is I went straight to ESPN Deportes almost afterwards. Went straight to Spanish-speaking media, particularly Mexican. And the words that kept flying from there were fraud, disgrace, retirement, shame, all on Chavez Jr. Even when they interviewed Chavez Sr. afterwards, when they tried to say, oh, when he asked, they literally asked him, what did your son tell you when you asked him why didn't he throw punches? He said he just couldn't. The weight drain was too much. He can't do this. He has to be at 168 pounds.
That just tells me that he just did it for the money.
It was a money grab.
A point here, Gail. A question for you. I don't know. I read something about a secret weigh-in that the general public didn't know about. Can you give me some details on that?
No, I can't, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, these guys test themselves on the scales before they have to officially get on the scales. We did have quite a delay before Chavez and Canelo walked into the MGM Grand Arena for the official weigh-in. So my guess is that he was testing the scale all morning. That's not unusual. I mean, they're gonna see where they're at. But the truth is, it might have been a whole lot better for him to take a couple of pound hit, fines, and bulk up that weight, because throwing his weight around on Canelo and fighting on the inside was really the only game plan that would have worked for him, which we talked about on this show. He didn't. He seemed to want to fight at distance, but he couldn't even do that well. He was as flat-footed as he always is. And the truth is, no, Daniel, he didn't quit, but that man had no moss in his mind the minute the opening bell sounded. No moss mentally the whole fight. He truly did just seem there for the paycheck. What a disgrace. He's been a disgrace in one way or another, just a screw-up kid from day one. The truth is, when you grow up with a comfortable life like he has, thanks to his father, you're not hungry enough to become a champion. You're just not. And he is fooling himself if he thinks he's going to gear up for a fight at 168. Who wants any of that? No one should spend another dime on that kid. If we do, it's our own fault for what we get.
I mean, I was going to say, as bad as Walter's rep dropped, not just from the boxing media, but also from his home country. This is 3 times worse. It would have been better if Chavez Jr. would have went the Kirkland route. Just go balls to the wall from the beginning.
Absolutely.
You know what? Knocked out, so be it.
Hell yeah. If he had been knocked out in the first, second, third round, but he'd done it aggressively, threw himself at Canelo, the fans would have said, well, okay, it wasn't much of a fight, but, good on you, kid. You gave it your best shot. You're just not capable. That was certainly preferable to just absolutely hideous performance. Hideous. That's one of the worst fights, honestly, I've ever sat and watched.
That wasn't a fight. That wasn't even a sparring session.
Right. And shame on Canelo, because if Chavez Jr. was that little of a threat, what the hell, man? You should have been able to flatten that guy and get us all the hell out of there so we could have all gone to dinner.
Right.
I disagree at one aspect when you say he didn't quit. I feel he did quit from a fighter's aspect, because there are different degrees to quitting. When you offer no resistance at all, that's quitting to me. You mentally gave up.
Oh no, I understand that difference.
He said no moss in his head.
Right.
And he stepped
in the ring.
Like I said, his only saving grace to me is that he didn't say no mas overtly. But here's the whole thing. Like I said, this is the reason why I bring the Spanish media when it comes to this, because they were so angry. And one of the shows that they do, one of the shows that they do is called Golpe a Golpe.
Yep.
They do a post show. It was, I forgot the girl's name, but one of the panelists was Juan Manuel Marquez. and he looked so embarrassed for Nacho when he had to talk about it, because he tried to make the case. He legitimately tried to make the case. Oh, it was the weight. It had to be the weight. And then when he kind of threw the one thing probably that really pissed me off afterwards, after hearing it the second time, was how Chavez tried to throw Nacho under the bus, saying, "Oh,
yes,
he did. Yes, he did.
Yes,
shame on him. You know, no other trainer would take him on because he's such a fuck up." And finally, Nacho said, "You know, I'll give it a shot." And Nacho gave it his best shot.
Nacho almost got rid of Chavez. Remember, he wanted to go to Cali for something. He said, "If you go to California, don't come back."
Yeah,
so he almost got rid of him, and he still hung with the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, not most of the trainers that have worked with Chavez Jr. over the last, 10 years or so have done so only out of respect to his father. Freddie Roach tried to get along with him, couldn't do it. It's just been a royal mess with him, and he's done. He's done. The sport. He might not think he's done with the sport, but the sport is done with him, and we are done with him.
I mean,
we are done. I've been done for a long, long time.
Yeah, this show is being recorded right now as the Spurs and Rockets Game 6 is happening, and he's sticking out the joint like the Rockets were right now against the Spurs. I mean, that's how bad it is.
It really was horrible. It's just horrible.
Let's go ahead, Daniel, before we move on.
No, like I said, the whole aspect of the whole thing, like when, like, so you mentioned on EJ's hangout, this was the hope that EJ had. He literally hoped that Nacho's plan was that he was going to do the rope-a-dope, play on Canelo's stamina, and if he gets tired, like around round 6 or 7 by throwing so many punches, then Junior will pounce. When he didn't even do that, he relented, said, "I guess, yeah, this is a circus." That's how bad this felt. And for something that in the weeks leading up to it, especially the week before that face-off, it looked like we might get a bloodbath, just the way these two hated each other. But
we got played. We got played by him. Shame on us. We got to remember this. We have got to remember this.
Indeed. Let's move on. We'll talk the future and what was in the news that broke afterwards, but I want to say that more for the news segment. But yeah, he stunk on ice. He has no rep right now, and no one should pay one thin dime the next time he returns back into the ring. I don't know how he can come back from the Simply, but I just don't know how he can come back from. He just shamed himself that much. We're going to talk about a couple of other fights on that card. David Lemieux was the main was the co-feature, if you will, the main undercard, I should say. Excuse me. Scored a win over Marcos Reyes, won by comfortable decision. Given the breaking news that happened after Canelo's win over Chavez Jr., the question is, where does Lemieux go from here in the middleweight division? I see Gus has joined us. Thanks for joining us, Gus. And I'll just make that an open question for anybody here who wants to respond.
I'm not sure Lemieux really raised his stock. He didn't particularly hurt himself, but it was a lot rougher of a fight than we all thought he'd have. We really didn't expect Reyes to hang in there quite as tough as he did. I mean, he was certainly beat up fairly badly, but it wasn't the most fun fight to watch. Of course, we thought that, and then we got the main event, so that was pretty bad. I still think that Lemieux is headed on a road to perhaps fight Daniel Jacobs. That is a fight I'd really love to see. I'd really like to see it. And if we've got Canelo versus Triple G and Lemieux versus Jacob, we almost in effect have ourselves a little middleweight tournament. And I'd like to see how they measure up against each other. I do think they'd bring out the best in each other for a fine fight. And that's certainly a fight that can be made.
Your thoughts about Lemieux, Bo?
I think, I agree with Gail. The interesting thing about it is David Lemieux, although his stock did not go up, the thing that always increases your stock is a guy whose stock has gone up. And Daniel Jacobs, because of his performance against 3G, stock has definitely gone up. Like, even in defeat, you would watch him fight another top quality opponent because he looked so good in defeat that it's a possibility he could probably, beat David Lemieux. So I like it. I think it's something that they should make. Now, the problem is going to be, because don't forget, the elephant in the closet is Billy Joe Saunders. There have been talks that Billy Joe Saunders may fight Daniel Jacobs. So if
Oh,
Jacobs got a chance to,
Daniel's favorite.
yep, and
We know how much Daniel loves him some Billy
it's
Ho.
Billy Joe, yeah. So if he fights the peanut butter hand sandwich making man for the WBO title, I think that's something that Jacobs will take over fighting David Lemieux. So
Yeah.
David Lemieux didn't do himself no favors. I definitely agree. Like, no one is itching at the mouth to watch the David Lemieux fight, and that was the fight where he could have did it, especially with the main event being what it was.
Yeah.
And especially coming off of his last opponent, which he just flattened Stevens with one shot.
Yeah.
I want to go to you, Gus. I want to get your assessment on Alvarez's win, Canelo's win over Chavez. I want to talk about specifically that fight. We can talk about the news that broke afterwards, but specifically, what your thoughts specifically on Canelo's easy win over Chavez, who, as far as I'm concerned, who gave nothing and basically quit.
Hey, Mike. Evening, everyone else.
What's going on, Gus? What's going on?
Mike, regarding the fight, shame on all the bone tops who were manipulated and succumbed to this Latin shit show, as I described it. Now, Mike, as a professional speculator, I generally take a hedge position over and under, not because I feel that is going to be the outcome, but because the probability of a long shot can sometimes negate a number of winnings where the position is extremely short. But in this particular fight, I didn't take any hedge position. I took two spot positions. One of them was Alvarez to win by knockout or TKO, and I lost on that and lost big. But the second position I took was for Alvarez to win every round and Chavez Jr. to not win a round in either a knockout or a points victory. So I recouped some of my losses on that position. So that was my feelings coming into this fight. I'd watched enough of Julio, specifically, the Brian Vera fight. I watched in detail the first fight they had, where Vera, was the better fighter. So, Mike, I harbor no criticism towards Julio Cesar at all. I don't accept that it was a money grab. I just think he was comprehensively outboxed and dominated. And specifically, I looked at the first round. I saw an extremely sharp Saul came out of the traps like a greyhound. I saw, some lethal uppercuts. I saw, a fantastic jab, a better jab that I've seen before. Alvarez, with this additional weight, the leverage he has, the foundation, taking off from his back foot and sort of rotating into the punch with his momentum. And, I saw Julio hurt in the first round, and quite clearly he didn't want to absorb any more of his power. So he wasn't allowed to establish any sort of rhythm. I don't know what folks are talking about. If you look at his punch volume in previous fights, he's never been a prolific puncher. So Was he going to vary his game plan? You know, assembling Nacho and Memo and all of these other luminaries. Their purpose was one-fold, and that was to, they wanted a slice of the pizza. They knew it was a high money fight. That was the only reason. It's just high profiles, mercenaries, cockroaches, literally. So in hindsight, Mike, I expected a one-sided domination, and that's exactly what I got. So my emotions are not one of disappointment or one of criticism. It was one of praise for Saul Alvarez, who operated at a functional weight. The purpose of the whole fight, Mike, was sort of sixfold. Number one, it was allow Gennady just to get a little bit older, whether it's a few months here or there. He's the other side of 30 now. Number two, it was about putting on a Golden Boy, basically putting on a pay-per-view so they can just reinforce their A-side position. Given Gennady fought recently, we'll just rack up 1 million pay-per-views just to reinforce that point. Number three, it was about replenishing Oscar De La Hoya's depleted business bank account. The position has become so afloat. They're on the verge of a capital injection from Wells Fargo. Number four, it was about Saul Alvarez. I think he's agreed a 50% lump sum payment to his former promoters, with a view to paying the others in installments, which is a bit of a joke considering his net worth is over 60 million. And number five, it was not the final one, is about acclimating to a weight that he's functional at, and he had the endurance now, which in previous fights he was very susceptible, but in this fight he looked comfortable, although he fought pretty much at his pace. So it's a win-win for him all the way around. So yeah, I enjoyed it very much.
I hear your point. I would slightly disagree in having no disappointing in Chavez. Essentially, you're giving a lot of the credit to what Canelo did, and you're framing this as a showcase on the one hand from Canelo to set up the future for him, both in terms of fighting in a new weight. And that being said, last week we talked about, Gus, how in the Joshua Klitschko bout, how there were moments, particularly after Klitschko hurt Joshua in round 5, put him down in round 6, and how Joshua was really in trouble at the end of round 6. There were opportunities there for Klitschko to really start firing, particularly with the right hand, and that he let that moment slip by. Credit goes to Joshua, of course, for fighting through the storm and evading the shots. Here in this fight, given how Chavez Jr. was so outclassed, given how Canelo could do anything he wanted, I'm a little bit disappointed that he could have stepped it up even more and tried to essentially force the referee's hand and get a stoppage, because after a while that got boring. Do you share a similar attitude, or are you just content with what you saw from Canelo, given what you described your feelings about this whole situation going in?
The answer is it's twofold, and it's a bit of a paradox, almost like a juxtaposition. You're right in the one sense, Mike, but the whole point was that the fight with Golovkin had already been signed. So hence, did Canelo want to overexert himself? I don't think he did. I don't think he wanted to, particularly damage his hands as either. I think he almost intentionally left a little bit of reserve, Mike. I think it's 100% strategic on his part.
Okay,
You can
cool.
say he could have knocked him out, but Julio Cesar has got a very, very good chin. The fights in which he's been stopped pretty much where it's more due to heart as opposed to him taking a comprehensively beating and capitulating in that side, being knocked out. He's got a very good chin. That's probably his best trait, but I think Canelo was so comfortable, Mike. There was no need to, step up another gear. So what? I mean, it's a knockout. Does it really matter? To me, it didn't personally.
Okay. Okay, understood. Quickly, your thoughts on Lemieux's win and what could be coming up for him, and then Daniel, you can respond. Your comments on Lemieux's win as well. First, you, Gus.
Lemieux, Mike, he's just a front foot bully of sort of B minus C plus level fighters. His opponent, has a reasonable record. I mean, he's beaten, Porky Medina, who's a decent fighter. So he isn't that bad. But Lemieux, it's just a one-dimensional search and destroy, Mike. Nothing spectacular. He was teeing off on the guy, but Lemieux was, it's just his customary open defense, Mike. Technically he's not the best. He's very off balance with his punches. Squares himself up as well. Looked horrible. I felt, he looked horrible on the scales. He looked horrible coming into this fight. I don't know, Mike. I just think his purpose is just a onefold, just to try and knock out his opponents. But if his opponents or even have that durability about him, or can be a little bit more slick, he can be beaten very easily as he can in the past. So I think he's a C plus B minus level fighter, Mike. Just never has and probably never will remotely even impress me.
I'll go to you, Daniel. Gus is not messing around with his description of his thoughts on Lemieux. I'll go to you, Daniel. Your thoughts on his win, Lemieux's win over Reyes, and what could be coming up possibly for him.
As far as the fight itself, there were some moments of success for Reyes. There you could tell that he hurt Lemieux a couple of times, but he never was able to step up, particularly after that cut that happened right at the temple area. And one thing to remind us is that Reyes is naturally a super middleweight. So he also drained himself to get into this fight, but he could tell that it's probably telling that Lemieux, as much power as he has, if a move to super middleweight is in the future, he may not have as much success as far as knockouts as he does now in the middleweight. But there really wasn't much when it came to Lemieux. Like, there was no real setup of real natural game plan. It would just come in, land a few bombs, and see if Reyes goes down. Reyes served his part. Tough opponent. Was able to take some of those shots. But as far as stock, it didn't go anywhere. It didn't go anywhere, Lemieux, considering his future may actually be Danny Jacobs. Because unless he pulls one of his classic training camp blunders, Billy Ho's is still slated to fight Cosei, where he'll probably lose if he shows up like the Billy Ho that I've seen lately. Which would actually, if Lemieux's smart, he could probably open it up, because then that's just two guys that just like to come forward and like to bang. It'd be similar to the Stevens fight, but Cressida wouldn't have the corner John David Jackson to at least teach Cressida some more defensive methods of boxing. But it didn't raise any stock. And if anything, like I said, given, like I said, what we're going to talk about in the news segment, and didn't do anything, like I said, to set him up for a future Canelo opponent either. So he's stuck in a little bit of a limbo, pretty much like how the rest of the middleweight division is at the moment until business is handled. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Let's move on. I'm gonna split these next two fights up. Gonna talk Lucas Matthysse here. I'm gonna split that up. Matthyse's win on his comeback fight. I'm gonna have Gail and Bo talk about that, and then I'm gonna have Gus and Daniel talk about that Parker win, which I'm sorry, it bored me. I didn't even watch the whole thing. I was just so ADD started to kick in. But Matthyse's win, 5th round stoppage over Emmanuel Taylor. During your description, your analysis of Canelo Chavez, the things you said that struck a chord with me was, try to paraphrase here, Gail. You said, who knew that Lucas Matthysse would bring the performance of the night? And indeed he did. Now I will say honestly that I still have yet to see the fight in its entirety. I just found video of it. So I'm gonna rely on you, Gail and Bo, to give a more accurate description of that fight. Matthysse, I read he looked good from the little bit I saw that he did. Your breakdown, as well as Bo's breakdown of Matthyse's win, comeback win Saturday night.
An exceptionally good return for Matthysse. Let's all remember, it's been about 18 months since Victor Postol took him apart and damaged his eye. So we wanted to see what did he look like. He was going to fight at welterweight. How's the eye? How's the ring rust? Is his head back in the game? Well, the answer to all the questions were positive for him. He looked great, all the new ink aside, which we were all ogling at first, it was pretty impressive right there, just keeping track of that. So we know what he's been doing for a lot of this year and a half off, getting all inked up front and back. But he came out strong, smart, not he didn't throw caution to the wind at all. He seemed to have very little ring rust, and he was in with a live dog. Emmanuel Taylor, forget the record, he's always been dangerous. And Matthysse absolutely took him apart. He had confidence, he had power, and he entertained, which is something I can't say for most of the other guys on the card. So now we're all eager to see, what do we do with him next? And I'll let Bo talk about the fight, and then we can talk about what's next. And there's some very juicy possibilities.
Your thoughts on Matthyse's win, Bo?
You know what, though? Let me tell you something about that fight. I think Lucas Matthysse did in that fight what we hope Chavez would do, which is he redeemed himself for the quitting in the post-out fight because of his eye.
Absolutely. Absolutely right.
Yep,
well put.
He redeemed himself. He came in the best. I've never seen Lucas Matthysse look that ripped. Think about this. The last guy to go back home to Argentina gained a whole lot of weight, and his name was Marcos Maidana.
Yeah.
Lucas Matthysse came back. He was ripped. He came back. He reminded us that, hey, he's still dangerous. And then he did something that I even thought was better, is he fought at 147. So he fought at a weight that was comfortable for him. Yeah. He fought at a weight that probably felt more natural to him. So his power was there and everything was there. Now, there was some people that was talking about Emmanuel Taylor. I said, wait a minute, stop. Emmanuel Taylor is he's a good, decent fighter that you want to fight coming back. He could upset you if you're not careful. And remember, he took Adrian Broner 12 whole rounds. So, don't discredit the Emmanuel Taylor. So I saw some things in Luther that I hadn't seen in a while. He did more boxing, and he looked for the shot to come to him instead of trying. Like he made it happen instead of waiting for it to happen. And normally Lucas Matthysse was one of those dudes, he was just looking for it to happen. In this situation, He was patient. He allowed it to happen. He created opportunities. So he showed me more of his boxing skills. So basically, Lucas Matthysse showed us he was back home working on his game, working on his craft, working to get better, and it showed in that fight, which, like Gail said earlier, and I'm mad because she stole my point. I was gonna say it in this right here
You know
was
what?
that
One
was
of
the
us.
best fight of the night.
what it was. You know, we always steal each other's best lines. I apologize for that.
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really for a comeback fight. That's the kind of statement you want to make against that kind of an opponent. You want to make it.
And on that
So
I
stage, and on that
yeah, and
stage,
on
you
that
know,
stage. So
absolutely terrific.
shout out to him. Because my only concern, and I know this is getting ahead, is that like you have a lot of fight like Rigo. I'm fearful Rigo's not gonna have. He's not gonna show us anything. He's gonna show us the same thing. It'll be great as from a technical aspect, but that's not what we want to see. We want to see you show us something different. Well, Lucas Matthysse made a statement, and if he can fight like this at 147, there's a lot of guys I would like. Like I would like to see Lucas Matthysse and Timothy Bradley. Put these guys in the ring together. I think that'll be a good fight at
I'll tell
147.
you what I'd like to see, and a lot of the people around me would love to see him fight Sean Porter.
Yeah. They actually was mentioning that on Twitter. A couple of people at Press Row was talking about that fight on Twitter, actually.
Yep, we sure were, and we'd all love to see a fight like that. That's makeable, and there's a lot of good possibilities for him. And you know, should he rise back up the ranks and do well at welterweight, you know, eventually he gets to the top of the mountain and Keith Thurman. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Give the man a shot. He certainly so far has shown he's capable. I mean, at least at this level, so far so good.
Yeah, indeed. I'm not mad at either of those fights. I see Jacob has joined us Jacob from Japan Boxing. Give you the opportunity right now before I go to Gus and Daniel to talk Joseph Parker. Give you the opportunity right now to your feelings on the fight, just specifically the fight, Canelo's win over Chavez Jr.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. And as far as Parker, you know, late replacement, you know, he did what he had to do, but I'm not so sure that I need to see him step up his competition and see how he's going to react. We saw Joshua do what he did, and kind of a lot of the stuff that people weren't sure about him. I think there's still a lot of questions with Parker. Does he have skills? Yes, but I'm not sure how he would handle the top level opponents. But hopefully we'll see one of those kind of telling fights soon. Chavez and Canelo. I'm joining late. I mean, to me it was garbage. I'm sure everybody said what they had to say, and I'll listen to the show later and find out. But you know, I was really disappointed. It kind of almost looked like it was a fixed fight in a sense, and you know, I might get a lot of shit for saying that, but it just didn't make any sense. You know, you can't win a fight if you don't throw punches, and it was supposed to be for Mexican pride and all this, you know, trash talking, and it didn't live up at all to like the hype. But I wasn't a big fan of the fight to begin with, so not much more I could say.
I'll go to you, Gus, and then Daniel. I mentioned Joseph Parker. He made first-time defense WBO heavyweight title. Fought a guy by the name of Cojanu. Excuse me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. Late replacement for Huey Fury. Parker won easily, but as I was saying, Gus, I had short attention span during this fight. Bored me. Stopped watching after a while. I got nothing from that. Your thoughts?
Mike, you probably have to move on to Daniel on this one, because I missed the fight live. I heard very bad feedback, and I've had numerous opportunities to watch the fight, but I haven't seen even a second of it. I only saw the Joseph Diaz fight on the undercard, but I didn't see this fight.
Oh, okay, no problem. If you saw the fight, Daniel, your thoughts?
I'm almost in the same boat as Gus. I didn't watch it live, but I saw enough highlights of it to see that most of what I saw on social media was pretty justified. it wasn't a great performance at all with Parker as far as the defense, particularly against a late replacement. Now, there's cases where late replacements can come into replacement. This wasn't even that. This was, like I think Parker just not really caring because it wasn't Hughie. Now, Hughie's talking about afterwards, oh, now I know I could knock him out. Like, you had your chance. Your family just decided to do fuck shit. So, in that aspect, I does feel bad for Parker. It just further, like I said, cements him as if you're gonna try to cherry pick a champion at heavyweight, he's gonna be the guy to do it. So like I said, so maybe a guy like Luis Ortiz or maybe Andy Ruiz Jr. could probably try to get a rematch fight. Or Wilder can just go for the unification right there because it looks like he has no interest in fighting Bermane Stiverne again. Stiverne kind of made it that clear, I think, a couple of days ago. So it would make sense. Not a really good performance, but in a way, it's kind of what I expected, considering just how late of a replacement this is. Still, I saw enough where even I fell asleep watching the highlights.
And I think I see Gail in the chat room said it was a snooze fest. Bo and I was talking about it before the show. We both turned away from it. So let's get to the news here. I'm going to you on this one, Gus. In your commentary, and giving your explanation for Canelo's win. Well, first of all, set this thing up. After Canelo's win over Chavez, Canelo announced and Golden Boy announced, brought Triple G in the ring. After a while now, we're going to see Canelo Alvarez and Triple G fight September 16th. The date, no locale has been named yet, but the fight has been signed and sealed. It is going to happen. Starting with you, Gus, in your description of Canelo's win and why you were not as upset with the performance, you alluded to the fact that this fight, something we now know in the aftermath, this fight was signed a couple of weeks before Canelo Alvarez wins. So your reaction to the fight and that it's finally happening. Unmute your mic, Gus. I see Gus is not.
I'm surprised that the fight is taking place this year, Mike. You may recall from previous shows, I anticipated that the fight was going to take place in 2018, Cinco de Mayo, and I made that prediction sort of back a couple of years ago, Mike. You'll probably recall on your show.
Yeah.
It is a surprise because I would have expected Alvarez to have fought Billy Joe first of all with a view of acquiring the WBO, and thus the fight would have been so much more lucrative as it would have been for the undisputed sort of unified belts. But I guess it's semantics now. Belts are not really the issue anymore. Certainly not for Alvarez. You know, he mentioned that the belt wouldn't be in the issue. I wouldn't even expect him to even make the rehydration for the IBF. I don't think he'll even care about that. Golden Boy's procrastination, which has been very visible. Its purpose has been for Canelo to not only fight at a much higher weight to acclimate himself, but the fundamental purpose has been waste the years on Gennady. He's what, I don't know what the age difference is 9 or something, 8 or 9 years between the two.
I think Canelo is 26 and Golovkin is 35. Yeah.
Yes, and given the difficulties that Gennady had in his last fight, in which his streak, when knockout streak came to an end, and he looked vulnerable, and there seems to be a 50-50 split on the outcome as well. So I think it's the right time for Alvarez, Mike. I picked Alvarez back in 2016. I've seen a lot of Golovkin in the amateurs. I've seen Gennady dominated at fights in the amateurs. His fighting style recently, Mike, has become to the extent where he's a headhunter now. He's a lunging headhunter. I see not only deficiencies, but I see a Gennady. I think his boxing ability is slowly saturating as well, Mike. I see a fighter who does not like to be hit by the body, and I was doing some video analysis the other day, even previous fights with Kasim Umar, etc., who was able to get under his punches and really cause him some difficulty. You can just see the visible expression on his face. He does not like to be hit to his body. And Alvarez, we know, is a superb body puncher. I think he's got the physical strength not only to absorb his punches. I think he's got the better jab. I think he's got the better combination punching in both hands. I think Gennady will respect his power. It will be a cagey fight initially. I don't see Gennady coming out gunslinging. I think the one advantage Canelo has, Mike, is that during a firefight, Gennady does not trade punches. You can go back and look at his footage. He will unload. If you're able to absorb his punches and fire back, he will cover up. And Canelo is a strong arguably the best combination puncher in boxing, certainly at some of the heavier weights. And if he continues just to fire combinations, Gennady won't trade back. He'll cover up, and that will present the opportunities for Alvarez. Now, when I went back and did my video analysis of the Jacobs Golovkin fight, Mike, initially it looked like Jacobs was having success up top, but when I went back and did a slow motion analysis, Gennady did actually a very good job in tucking his chin in. A lot of Jacobs' punches up the top were either coming off the side of his shoulder or on the top of the head. Very seldom were there punches that were actually landing flush on Gennady's face. So Alvarez will then have to go to the body because Gennady does actually have a good defense up top. So I think Alvarez has a very, very good chance of making severe inroads in this fight. I'm not sure whether he can stop him. I felt at first maybe he could, but I can certainly see him getting a comfortable but I can certainly make the case to see him winning the fight on points, Mike.
Interesting. I'll go to you, Daniel, while Gus expressed surprise that the fight is happening this year. You have always said that September 2017 is going to be the date. So any reaction to the announcement, your thoughts? Other than I told you so.
This was actually perfectly played by Golden Boy in a way. Apparently, this fight was signed 2 weeks ago, and they made it. They even had Triple G not come into Vegas, not even show up to Vegas until the day before, so nobody could even speculate. But apparently, like that day they gave HBO word, okay, this is happening, get the production ready. But even HBO was surprised because Kellerman didn't look like he was ready to ask any real significant questions because he was shocked that this fight was happening. Now, was it a case of Golden Boy just waiting for signs that Triple G may be slowing down a bit, and that may be the case when you look at the Jacobs fight. But in a lot of ways, to me, it is interesting. Like I said, that Canelo never really maneuvered too overt. Well, he might have if Chavez would have said no to just taking money away from hardworking Mexicans. But it would have been probably Canelo Saunders, and he probably would have had a little bit more significant meaning belt-wise. But I think we can all agree this has moved a little bit beyond belts. This is arguably the two most popular fighters in this hemisphere, in the same weight division, having a fight where everyone was starting to get the Maypac feeling. That, oh, we're going to wait another year or another year. There are people who already said, oh, they're going to announce a Lemieux fight side. Even EJ, apparently Freddie Roach told EJ that the fight was already made for Triple G to fight Cotto this year. That's how much speculation is around this fight. And for these guys to do it apparently within a span of 2 weeks, make a fight. That granted, we don't have a venue because apparently, and Gus, you can correct me if I'm wrong this, apparently Wembley Stadium is gone.
According to Tom Loeffler, according to Oscar De La Hoya, after the fight, he told us repeatedly he's heard from Wembley. That's not his best bet. Our money is all on AT&T Stadium in Dallas. They're familiar with Oscar. Jerry Jones would love it to have a big fight. He's had Golovkin and his team out there. They were out there for a Cowboys game last season. Place your money there, folks. That's where it's going to happen.
Yeah, a Golden Boy actually recently mentioned had a poll, like on Twitter, asking fans where would you want this fight, and that was a clear favorite, and it should be. You could literally fill 100,000 seats in this fight because Triple G has been dying to get into that stadium for a while, and if there's one thing that Golden Boy has done pretty well when it comes to Canelo, is actually build up a fan base for him in Texas. So it makes sense from that front. As far as the fight itself, you have a guy like in Triple G that is more known to be a headhunter in a lot of ways, but he does throw money. He does throw pretty vicious body punches. You can ask Martin Murray and Matthew Macklin how they took it. Now, the issue though is going to be is it didn't look in this, like I said, well, granted, like I said, it wasn't even a sparring session. It was literally Canelo hitting a sentient punching bag. But he didn't look bothered by the weight. In fact, he probably looked a little bit more natural. Fighting in that weight, his combinations looked a little bit crisper, and he just looked more natural in that weight. You have that against a Golovkin who, as Danny Jacobs has shown, is technically in a leaning area of a small middleweight. And you're gonna have somebody like Canelo come in, who most likely, I said, will, unless his pride gets in his way, which it might, like to completely ignore the IBF, balloon up to again 170 pounds from the Jacobs handbook, and try to put the fight on Golovkin. Now, Golovkin can also land a good shot at Canelo in the exchanges, and Canelo could say good night. But The key point is the fight is happening. We don't know where yet, but I agree with Gail. If you're a betting man, like we have here in Gus, you and also considering that on that very weekend, the Dallas Cowboys are not home. They are playing at Mile High against the Denver Broncos. You might want to place your bets to heading there to Jerry's Road in Texas.
Indeed. I'll go to you, Gail and Jacob. Both of you are from Southern California. Gail, you're right close to the border, Mexican border. Your reaction to the announcement, particularly in the SoCal scene, from a media perspective, you Gail, from a fan perspective, you Jacob. The level of excitement has to be tremendous.
Yeah, Dana White would have been very proud the way it was staged. We suspected something might be coming. We didn't quite expect the full graphics presentation, the Kazakh flag flying on the Jumbotron, the walkout song, all the production pieces were in place, which of course led some in the arena to say, okay, fix, but really, this is a fairly sure bet, let's face it, with Chavez Jr. I thought it was handled very well. The pair of them both came out for post-fight news conference remarks. Actually, stepping back just a minute, surprisingly, Chavez Jr. came out to speak to the press after the fight. He came out first.
Why?
Yeah, beats me. If he's really thinking, he had anything to offer to say, any defense of himself, that was pretty amazing to us. I mean, we were sort of slack-jawed that he was going to come out to talk to us, and we thought, fine, okay. This is where he, once again threw Nacho under the bus. But then Canelo came out. Oscar and Canelo wanted to talk about the fight of the evening first, and then Golovkin was brought out, and they both discussed the fight to come. They did the first official face-off. They seem to get along very well. They have respect for each other. They were very congenial. It was quite funny. Chavez or Canelo came out very quickly after the fight, dressed in a suit. You've seen the face-off pictures. He didn't have a mark on him, which is pretty funny. You wouldn't necessarily expect them to pose for face-off photos and video right after Canelo had a fight, but he looked fine. In fact, there was also a Tecate after party scheduled for Canelo at one of the bigger clubs in Vegas right after the fight. So they were all thinking things were going to go pretty much as we saw them, apparently, and planned for it. People enjoyed it. It was their one little ray of sunshine after having sat through that horrible fight. Those that actually did stick it out to the bitter end were rewarded with, a little fanfare, a little show. They were very excited. And remember, the Golovkin camp in Southern California has been extremely smart in cultivating the Mexican and Mexican-American fans. And when you go to a Golovkin fight in Los Angeles, it's Mexicans for GGG, folks. So it's going to be a very, if anything, you could say it's going to be a 50-50 audience when you're talking about the Mexican-American Latino fan base. But I think it might even be 60-40. Golovkin is absolutely beloved by the Mexican fans. They love the fact that he's embraced them, that he pays attention to them. So this is going to be an interesting situation for Canelo, who, has his detractors. The truth is, coming into the fight, and especially at the weigh-in last week, it was predominantly Chavez Jr. people, which was stunning to me. But we're going to see, I think, a little bit of the same. It's going to be a very interesting fight. Canelo looks good. Canelo looks good at 160 plus. He has not lost any speed. Combinations were sharp. Whatever criticisms we have of him not going in for the kill against Chavez Jr., his skill set is very impressive at this weight. When he did a media workout about a month ago, it was very clear that they were demonstrating how much speed he still had. And interestingly enough, a lot of the weight gain on Canelo is not to the torso, it was to the legs. That man's thighs bulked out like he'd been doing the killer squats of all time. It was remarkable. Honestly, I think almost all the weight gain was in the legs. So that's going to set him up well for being sturdy and being able to take a shot. It's really going to be an interesting fight.
I'm going to you, Jacob. Your thoughts on your reaction to the announcement, particularly the Mexican American market. You being, I believe, part Mexican yourself. You being in SoCal, you attend a lot of the fights in that area. I'm sure that's going to be the talk of the entire spring and summer leading up to the bout.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret. I'm not the hugest Canelo fan, and yeah, I am part Mexican, but my allegiance isn't to a specific, ethnicity, but just, I just want to see good boxing, and when I go to these live shows. But yeah, I mean, the announcement, it's out, and I still have, until they get into the ring, I'm gonna always have my doubts on, is this going to actually go down or something going to go south, or I don't know. I know that contracts are signed, but I don't know. I've seen promises before and, not come to fruition. But as far as the fight itself, I don't know. I have I have some anger towards Golovkin, for one reason specifically, that was talking about all the belts, and he had his opportunity with Billy Joe Saunders, and he bypassed it for this fight, which is going to be a mega fight with Canelo Alvarez, who hasn't really been campaigning at 160. So to me, I'd rather his team just come out and say, hey, they're looking for the paydays or the big fights than all the belts talk, because he had an opportunity potentially to unify the division, and which hasn't been done in a long time. And I think he's obviously not going to happen now. The other part of this, and I think someone brought it up earlier, is that I think Canelo is going to probably do the same thing that Danny Jacobs did. And so let's say Golovkin loses, he would still be the IBF champion. So that's going to make things a little weird. But I still picking Golovkin in this fight. I still, as much as an improvement Alvarez has made, I still think he's a little overrated. I think his power is overrated. His two biggest knockout wins, as far as vicious knockouts, were against a layoff chinny James Kirkland, who got knocked out by a feather duster, and Amir Khan, who was getting knocked out at welterweight. And the fact that I didn't really see him hurt Chavez in the fight. I felt like Chavez wasn't throwing any punches. I felt like he could have done more in the Cotto fight. A smaller man also, he didn't seem to hurt him. So this power that everybody talks about, I've yet to see it with like a legit person at that high weight like Golovkin's. And Golovkin's performance against Jacobs wasn't the greatest, and I personally thought that he lost that fight. But Jacobs is a legitimate 160 pounder, and so if you have a close fight or even a bad performance against what I consider a legitimate middleweight, to me though, that means more than these fights against these other guys that are either really small or are not that impressive to me because of the things I spoke about. So it's going to be a big fight. I agree it's going to be in Dallas. I did check the schedule, the Dallas Cowboys schedule. They are going to be out of town, like I think Daniel said. So I mean, they'd be stupid not to hold it there, because I actually think it'll be more Canelo fans, because they have done a good job of building his fan base in Houston. And even though there are a lot of Golovkin fans, but you know, Golovkin, and I said this a long time ago, he's had in a sense, a tougher road wise, because when you're a Mexican fighter, you automatically, in essence, have Golovkin had to build his fan base. He had to basically, like Gail was saying, he's been out there trying to, you know, make a show for the people and fighting often, and, you know, learning Spanish and, you know, trying to cater to that. So I think there are a lot of people that do appreciate that. And in like Canelo, where he's kind of handed the fan base because he's Mexican. I mean, every fight I go to fight and there's a Mexican fighter, I mean, it doesn't matter if they don't know who he is. They're going to cheer for him if he's fighting, you know, someone else that's not Mexican. So, you know, hopefully, the fight happens. I hope Golovkin wins and you know, squashes the myth of Canelo. But if Canelo wins, I'll give him his credit.
Before I go to Bo, let me say I hear your point, your skepticism, Jacob, regarding both fighters. But I will say that a super fight is a super fight. In many ways, this is considered a super fight, coming off of Joshua Klitschko and what kind of event that was. I'm glad that this fight is finally happening. You need mega fights like this to draw the attention of not just us hardcore heads and whatnot, but casuals and even folks outside the quote unquote boxing sphere. So yeah, I share some of your skepticism, Jacob, but I think they will come together and produce a good fight. They really have no choice, in my opinion. So yeah, skepticism aside from you, Jacob, and even some of my inward skepticism too, I'm all good with this. And again, I'm glad this fight is finally happening. It's wanted, and it's something that is really needed. I go to you, Bo. Interesting enough, tie a bow around this announcement. Canelo and Triple G. It's finally gonna. We're finally going to see it.
Well, I was listening to Jacobs talk about Canelo's power. Here's the thing about power. Power is measured in 3 scales. There's elite level power, which is Deontay Wilder type power. That one punch, that's it, knockout. One punch, that you're done. Then there's 10. Then there's 7. Canelo Alvarez has 7 level, which is, it's not something that'll knock you out, but it's hard enough to where you're not going to want to get hit by that too many times. Canelo Alvarez also, he punches to the body, probably he puts more torque on his body punching than he does on his head punching. So, and I actually believe that the reason why that they took this fight, they took it 2 weeks ago, is because there may be some legitimacy to the Daniel Jacobs fight. Maybe Gennady Golovkin, who we saw Jacobs really lay some leather on him. Maybe Gennady Golovkin, maybe not hurt, but something happened back in that dressing room where they decided, you know, we may want to go ahead on and go for this big money fight. Instead of trying to fight Billy Joe Saunders, let's go ahead on and get this big money fight. So something happened after that Jacobs fight that changed their tone. Now, I do agree with you, Jacobs, because it was always about belts. That was always their thing. They was preaching, him, his team, and his fans. And this goes against all of that. But the only thing with being upset about that is this is boxing. We've seen guys, for whatever reason, when money, be it opportunity, or whatever the case may be, they will sing a different tune. They will change like a baby's diaper.
Excuse me for interrupting, but are you more in line with Gus's theory that there's some possible deterioration here with Triple G?
No, but here's the thing about it. I'm not going to say possible deterioration because he's 34 or 35 years old, but he's not an old 35 years old. He hasn't been in too many of those fights we saw with Jacobs. He hasn't been in too many of those. So there's still some freshness there, but it might be a big enough chink in his armor now to where you can possibly, they probably figure, listen, we're starting to see some chinks in your armor that are becoming very visible. So maybe we should go for this money fight right now. So I can't say deteriorating, but I don't have a problem if somebody wants to say that either, because what we saw from Daniel Jacobs, because the reality is we've seen Canelo step up in after the Floyd Mayweather fight. We've seen him learn from that fight, and he took what he learned from that fight over into when he fought Edison Lara, and of course when he fought Angulo. And then, each fight we saw him learn something. I saw him in the Chavez fight. He actually did a catch and shoot. He counted more than I ever seen him counter. Okay, he kept constantly pumped that jab. His combination body head punching combination is probably one of the best that I've seen in that division. A lot of guys don't do it the way he does it. After every combination, he looks to land to the body. But the problem with Canelo is he's not the swiftest of feet. I think Gennady Golovkin has better footwork. Canelo Alvarez, after every combination, he keeps his head straight up. His chin is not tucked down behind his shoulder and down on his chest. He finished every combination with his head straight up. So, because there was a few times Chavez was able to hit him with a right hand over the top because of that reason after his combinations. So it's a 50-50 fight. There are things about Chavez. I mean, there are things about Canelo I think Gennady Golovkin can exploit, and then there are things about Golovkin I think Canelo can exploit. But I definitely believe something happened in that Jacobs fight that made them say, you know what? Nope, we're going to go for this big money fight. And my biggest curiosity is I want to know, what did they agree to? What was it, the original amount that we had heard, which was $10 million or $15 million? Like, what did they agree to? Because you know, at first they was talking it wasn't enough and all this thing. So, but the fight being announced, though, I said this, they kind of hijacked the summer because everybody's going to be talking about this until the fight happened. Which, when you think about it, it's kind of indicative to how things go in boxing, because here you clearly have a fight where uh I can sit here, like you said something about Jacobs. No, you said Jacobs said something about Gennady Golovkin's path in the middleweight division was a little bit tougher than Canelo's, but Canelo has faced better opponents, in my opinion, on a world class level than Gennady Golovkin has. So you got the Andre Ward fight coming up. Well, it's just been overshadowed with this news that we heard. You got the Terence Crawford Felix Diaz fight coming up. It's just been overshadowed with this stuff we heard. So this is a big thing, and it's happening at the right time. And props to them for doing it in a fight that if we wouldn't have heard that announcement at the end of this fight, we would be talking about what a sham that Golden Boy gave us a hell of a lot more than we would be talking about him fighting Gennady Golovkin.
Yeah, this announcement definitely saved them because I was ready to pounce and give Holy Golden Boy holy hell for what they gave us on that pay-per-view. Since there's really no significant fights no happening this weekend, what I plan to do now is preview some bouts on the 20th of May and probably take next week off. So when we return in 2 weeks, we'll be really, really caught up. So I'm gonna split some fights here because there's so much boxing happening all over on the 20th. I'm going to you on this one, guys. Open up your mic because this is a low-key good fight amongst the smaller ranked fighters. Kosei Tanaka, who looked very good in his last outing, uh, moved up to 108 and won a title there. He's going to be fighting Angel Acosta, uh, number one contender. Very good fight. We've talked in the past, Gus, about uh, the Yamanaka Neri bout that is going to happen this year. A fight to really look out for amongst the mighty mites, if you will. This is another one of those fights. I'm really excited about it, Gus. For those who don't know anything much about Tanaka and Acosta, talk about the fighters themselves and the fight against their fight against each other.
Yeah, if I'm honest, Mike, I'm probably more excited about this fight than I was even the Canelo and the Golovkin announcement. Hence, I've always been fan of the lower weights, and Tanaka in particular, Mike. You remember I mentioned him on our show before the year, before he got in the ring and won his second title fight.
Yes.
Very, very exciting. Just he just brings that impetus now in the lower weight divisions. You can see the sort of youthful exploits, but as a fighter, you know, not only does he possess, you know, very, very good movement, but his IQ in the ring as well, which seldom do you see for young fighters. You almost see him, you know, a little bit reckless, etc. But he has that combination of hunger, desire, you know, the speed you'll see with a very young fighter, but ring IQ and certainly power. If you go back to some of his early fights where he's actually been in trouble, he's made adjustments very late in the fight, and then ultimately he's relied on his power to get him out of trouble when he didn't acquire that much of experience. So there are still some vulnerabilities there, but he's just been on a roll, and that Moses Fuentes victory was just for a guy who took Donny Nietes to points twice and gave him very, very good fights in the Philippines, and Tanaka treated him with disdain. Just dominating. I mean, I don't know about you, Mike. I was shocked with just the manner and the quickness of the victory. I would expect.
And it's not just the quickness of the victory, the form that he displayed, just such marked improvement from Tanaka in all areas of his game.
Yeah, and that fight he was using a little bit more, lateral movement as well, circling around a little bit, almost confusing, setting traps. And Fuentes was just susceptible, just couldn't deal with it. And but this particular fight against Acosta is it's going to be a far more difficult fight. Acosta he can certainly box, and he can certainly punch as well. Very good on the inside. Now, Tanaka tends to fight a little bit more from sort of long distance. He'll jump in between the ranges from long to sort of mid and come inside. But Acosta, he will look on the angles to try and collapse the pocket and come on the inside. So I think it's a very good clash of styles here. Very exciting fight. Difficult to sort of make a prediction straight away. I'm going to have a look at their training footage, see what sort of shapes and strategies they're looking at. But a very mouth-watering fight, certainly for the folks who don't watch the lower weights. Whatever the time is going to be, it's definitely a fight worth getting up for on Japanese time and tuning in. I think it's going to be arguably one of the fights of the year, Mike.
Indeed. That fight is happening in Japan. I can't remember the city exactly. In Tokyo, not in Tokyo, but in Nagoya. That same day, in the UK. And I'll go to you on this one. I'll go to you on this one, Bo. Gervonta Davis, fresh off of his dominant win over Pedraza, handled him with easy work, to quote Floyd. He's going to be fighting Liam Walsh, going to be aired live on Showtime here on the afternoon of the 20th. For me, I think Gus and I have talked about this in the past. I think that Walsh is going to be he's going to present a little bit more of a challenge than folks think. Your thoughts on that fight?
Yeah, I definitely think Walsh is going to be a bigger challenge than he thinks. The thing with Tank Davis, in my opinion, actually should be fighting at 126 because he's short. And I mean, that works to his advantage, but it also works against him. Welsh is taller. Welsh can, if he uses his jab, if he fights like a big man, like the taller guy, he can give Gervonta Davis trouble because Pedraza, as long as he was pumping that jab, long as he was giving him them angles and showing him the movements and giving him different looks, he was having some success against Tank Davis. The
And for
problem
me,
is,
I think Walsh is a little bit higher caliber skill wise than Pedraza. He does a lot more slick stuff.
right. Right. So, so so yeah, and if Tank Davis goes into this believing the hype, then he can come out with an L. So he needs to take this very seriously because Walsh is undefeated too. Now, I've heard people say, well, Walsh hasn't fought nobody. Well, outside of Pedraza, neither has Tank. Outside of Pedraza, and we can even kind of question Pedraza. So neither one of you can't do that, especially when you're talking about a situation where both guys is still sort of in the trying to make their name phase. So it's a very interesting fight, and it's good for Tank because it will give him some exposure overseas. So that would be it's a very interesting fight. I'm curious to see how it turns out because Wall seems to be intent on not losing in his home backyard. And that fighting in the UK, going to UK to win a fight in the UK with all the fans and them and UK fighter with all that momentum going in there, it can be a difficult task. And I just hope Tank is up for it.
Quickly, you guys talk about this fight right quick. I know you're a betting man. Are you smelling upset here? Are you willing to wager bet on this bout?
Mike, when the fight was first announced, I thought that Lemieux had certainly a reasonable shot. But my only worry with him, Mike, as much as he's a very slick boxer, can be very hard to hit, silky skills sometimes, good technique. But my only worry, Mike, is his punch resistance. If you go back and watch the first ever show on Box Nation, he was involved in one of the fights of the year against Appleby. And he had to overcome great adversity in the fight. He was hurt very, very badly. And in some of his other fights as well, Mike, he's been knocked onto the canvas. So it's his punch resistance I worry about, not his skills. But Gervonta does have that ability to find an elusive target because he does have very good movement. But my biggest worry with Tank Davis, Mike, he's too front foot heavy. You can actually predict his punches. If his front foot is not planted, he won't throw a punch. So if Liam is able to gauge that from his footwork, he has a chance. But if Tank hunts him down, which I think he will, I just think he's got a little bit too much power, Mike. And I think that will ultimately be the decisive factor in the fight.
Want to move on to Showtime card on the 20th. 3 bouts I want to focus on. Want to go to you, Jacob. Andre Dirrell fighting Uzcategui, interim super middleweight bout, IBF, blah 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 blah. But forget the belt. But let's focus on the fight itself. What are you expecting from Andre Dirrell, who's always seemed to come up a bit short, in my opinion? Has the talent, but he doesn't have that little it thing to like carry him over the top. Your thoughts, Jacob? Okay, I see Jacob left. I'm sorry. I didn't see that Jacob left. I'll go to you, Daniel. Your thoughts. The same question applies to you, Daniel. In terms of okay, I see Jacob is back now. We're talking Andre Dirrell.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Uzcategui. Forget the fact it's for an interim belt. Who cares about that? But talk about the fight itself, and Dirrell, who seems to have allowed all the talent in the world, but there just seems to be something missing to carry him over the top.
Yeah, I mean, I still think Dirrell's a really talented guy. I mean, he had some minor setbacks. I mean, arguably, the Frotch fight, he didn't lose. It was, some home cooking, and then his only other losses against DeGale, which was also a close fight. He did a lot of comeback in that fight. And maybe if they fight again, it's a different story. DeGale's had some tough fights of recent, and maybe he's this would be time for him to pounce on him. But I expect Dirrell. You know, he's a smart fighter. He has skills. I expect him to come out and, you know, do what he normally does. I mean, he's not what I would call like a KO artist, and lately in a sense, but you know, we'll see how he does. But he, in my opinion, he needs to be, you know, stay active, and see if he can get a couple more wins under his belt. You know, he only had that one fight in 2015 and then another one in 2016. So now we're in 2017, almost halfway through the year, and, you know, you need to fight more. He's not going to get any younger, and for him to get another opportunity at a potential title, and put himself in the mix, he just has to get out there more. But I definitely think that he has the skill and the talent to compete with the best of them at super middleweight.
A little bit disappointed Scorsese's not here tonight, because we're going to talk about one of his absolute favorite fighters, Rances Barthelemy. He's fighting Kiryl Relikh. Go to you on this one, Daniel. Barthelemy, he's kind of the sleeper guy in that 135, 140 mix here. So yeah, he has a fight also on that same Showtime card here. Talk about him.
This is an interesting fight because this is a WBA title elimination. And that puts him in the path of either, like I said, put him on Julius Ndongo should he choose to. Now, Barthelemy, like I said, he comes from this Cuban School of Boxing. Really, really good boxer. Does leave himself open a couple of times because he does like to engage. But this should probably be an easy fight for him. And like you said, Mike, he is a player to me in those two weight divisions. Because he can make 135 if he needs to, but I think 140 presents probably an easier path considering the champions that are right now 135 and the business they have to handle. But it could be an easy way to get, possibly even considering that Eddie Hearn still has, I don't know how many options left on Ndongo. Possibly like try to get some of that UK money. Like a lot of Al-Haymon fighters have been doing, trying to get UK money against an A side and maybe walk away with a belt. We don't know, because Ndongo, even in the way that he won against Ricky Burns, you can still say he's somewhat of an unknown factor. Because the two times we've seen him in the audience, one was a knockout and the other one was a schooling of a guy who we've seen be schooled before. Barthelemy has the potential to do the same to him. It's going to be a nice test. I want to see how motivated Barthelemy is, because sometimes motivation is not always his best thing, but it is a belt, and it's also considering the fact that this could eventually lead to a fight with Terence Crawford should he stay at 140 pounds Crawford. So it's time to throw down, because Barthelemy has been a champion, and it's time to make that move again because you still have the skill set to do it.
Barthelemy versus Relikh, Uzcategui, and Dirrell. This is all part of the same card that's going to be going down on Showtime in Oxon Hill, Maryland, a new kind of hot spot on the boxing scene on the East Coast. The main event of this card is Gary Russell Jr. fighting Oscar Escandon. And I'll go to you on this one, Gail. Look, this fight has been much delayed a lot, many times over. Supposed to happen earlier this year, was supposed to happen last month. Multiple delays is finally happening. Is there a possible rust factor here with Russell Jr., who against an Escandon, who may not be the most talented guy, but he's rough, he's physical. So could it be an issue of ring rust here because Russell Jr. hasn't fought so long? Or is it just a case of just him being too fast, too skilled for the likes of Oscar?
It's going to be an interesting fight. You know, there are a lot of threads to this fight, and you know, you might need a diagram here before I'm done. But you're right. Russell has been out for more than a year, and partially not his fault, but he has never seemed to really get back on his horse the way that we all expected him to since he lost to Lomachenko. He's had several fights since then. A few of them were okay, but I haven't really seen him in a barn burner ever since he lost. And that fight was, let us remind ourselves, in June of 2014. And then he had a gimme fight a couple months later, 6 months later, after he lost to Loma. And then the only other fight he had in 2015 was to beat up Johnny Gonzalez, got a TKO. And then he fought Patrick Hyland again. On paper, record looked okay. But, Russell hasn't shown me a lot since then. So here he is. We're finally going to get him in against Oscar Escandon. So Escandon, for those of you who don't know him very well, he has got 2 losses on his record, and they're sort of interesting losses. One is to Moises Chucky Flores. Now, I saw him lose that fight, and Chucky took him apart, but it was a split decision. So that was sort of strange. But the fight he had just before he lost to Flores was a fight in December 2014. This is going to seem obscure. But once I remind y'all, you're going to say, oh, yeah, I remember that fight. Escandon in December 2014 fought a guy named Tyson Cave at Pachanga Resort and Casino, which is about 45 minutes north of me in San Diego in the Riverside County, Southern Riverside County casino, big-ass casino. So Flores fights, Tyson Cave fights Escandon. Escandon clearly won the fight, clearly. But the fight was given to Tyson Cave, and Teddy Atlas had the epic rant of all time that night. Trust me, find it on YouTube. Eddie, just type in Teddy Atlas epic rant or Eddie Atlas or Teddy Atlas Tyson Cave. Boom, it'll come up, and you'll say, "Oh yeah, oh that's right, I saw that." So Escandon has figured in some interesting things here. Now, Escandon's last fight was against Robinson Castellanos at the DC Armory, and he lost. He lost a knockout to Castellanos. Castellanos, who's definitely a journeyman. I mean, his record is 23-11 at that time. Castellanos out of Mexico fought last Friday night in the Golden Boy Friday Night Fights and beat the hell out of Yuriorkis Gamboa.
Don't get mad, Bo.
Yeah. He took Gamboa apart. We could not believe it. And I was
wondering if we're going to bring this up.
I was ringside for that fight, and I'll tell you what, we were dumbstruck. And so here's Teddy Atlas, watching this again. So these guys all have this interesting interwoven history. What version of Oscar Escandon is going to show up? We don't know. But he has certainly got some give-me's on his record. And he's also been robbed himself. But it's going to be a very interesting fight because we've got 2 guys and we really do not know which version of either of them is going to show up. No idea. Well worth watching. I couldn't even begin to predict what's going to happen here.
The reason I didn't mention that fight, Jacob, was because that's a sensitive subject to Bo.
I guess I just poured salt right in the wound, didn't I?
Bo had a hangout on his show discussing that fight Friday, and he nearly cussed everybody out.
Nearly.
And I didn't want to get muted on my own show. So they talk about how Gamboa is done. So I kind of purposely left that.
Yeah,
he's following in the footsteps of his previous manager, 50 Cent, apparently.
Holy moly, Bo! My sympathies, man. It was painful for us to watch ringside. Really, really painful. I just nothing that we predicted. Boy, it was. In fact, very few of the favorites won on the televised fights. Thank God we had 5 walk-off fights after that event was over, and I stayed till the bitter end, and thankfully all the favorites won.
Indeed. And, Bo must be away from us right now because I'm surprised he's not saying anything.
Well,
20-1. Actually, I'll do it.
Oh, there we go.
20-1. 20-1, man. ¿Qué pasó ahí? 21.
And like I said,
Man, look, let me tell y'all. I'm actually talking to you guys and arguing with some dummies over Terence Crawford's resume, and it's the most ridiculous statements I'm hearing ever. The question was, how would he become a mega star? And someone said, well, he has to fight a star in order to be a mega star, he has to fight a star like Canelo and Gennady Golovkin. And I'm like, what mega star did them two dudes beat? You guys lost your fucking minds. So, and it's tiresome sometimes talking to people who don't read shit. But the thing with Gamboa is we discovered the one thing that a lot of us already knew, which was Gamboa was, if you have been following his career, Gamboa was and he probably is, a lighter weight version of Roy Jones. He's a guy who had quick hands, great reflexes, good speed, and he relied on all of that, his athleticism, and never worked on his craft. And at 35 years old, 36 years old, the reflexes are slower. The speed is slower. Your ability to take punishment is slower. And he tried to fight it out and gave in to it. So there were a lot of what ifs, there were a lot of what if, or about Gamboa. What if he would have fought Mikey Garcia? What if we would have got that fight with Juan Manuel Lopez? I think I wrote an article about that. So the Gamboa loss, although it was a shock to some people, to most it really wasn't, because the fight previously to that. And then I felt he fought too soon. He just fought 2 months prior to, and then he's returning 2 months later at 35 years old without letting your body rest properly. And it bit him. So there are some people that say he might be done. He probably needs to retire. I'm one of those that agree, because at this point, I don't think Golden Boy is going to invest anymore in him. I really don't think they're going to invest anymore in him unless they're going to use him as to be a name on guys' resume, to build him up through Golden Boy. So that's
he's 35 years old, and remember,
he's not 35. He's not 35, Gail. He's not 35. Right. Gail.
I was just going to say, you beat me to the punch as usual. Very
he's
quick.
34.
He's 35 with a Cuban birth certificate. We all know what that means. And he was beaten by a legit 35-year-old Mexican. I mean, he wasn't just beaten, he was slaughtered. I mean, it was ugly. We all like a good bang, but holy cow, it was bad. And that was a rough night for Oscar. Almost everybody lost. All his favorites lost on the televised card. Thank God, the rest of the fight saved it for him. But Gamboa he was done. He was done. He was given every chance to try to, come back in that fight. It really should have been stopped before it was. It was just a vicious loss. You do not easily recover from those losses at a younger age. You sure as hell aren't going to recover, at the end of a long career like that. I just don't see.
And the thing about Raz Barthelemy is, if he fights this guy Relikh, and hopefully he gets either Ndongo or whatever. Terence Crawford has his hands full with Felix Diaz. So, but if he gets Ndongo, then he has a chance to make history. He'll be the first Cuban fighter to ever have won 3 titles in 3 different weight divisions. Joel Casamayor only did it in 2. And I talked to Raz Barthelemy. I'm always talking to him, his brother, and a couple of them guys. Raz is ready. He is ready. He's been down there working out with Salas at the gym. They have been preparing. He's training like crazy. He showed up for the Gamboa fight, and that was the only break I think he took was that. So he's ready. Yeah. And and I asked him, I said, should I put money on you? And he said, bet the house. So I mean, but I'm not betting. But, but
My boy Relik's
he's
taking
definitely
him out.
winning. Huh?
What was that, Gus?
My boy Relikh is taking him out.
Oh,
I think he might too. I think it's been kind of a bad year for Cubans.
And let it begin.
I'm saying. Whoa. I was.
All I'm gonna say is I'm so glad we don't have a podcast next week.
I think that is Michael's gift to you.
Let's move on to the biggest bout of that weekend. Terence Crawford fighting Felix Diaz, I believe at the Big Garden, the Big Room, MSG, on HBO. I'm just going to open up and have let everybody chime in on this bout. Crawford, give him kudos for taking this kind of tough opponent, because I know a few folks who believe that at the very least Diaz is going to give him hell. I even know some folks who think Diaz is going to produce an upset here. So yeah, the floor is open to anybody who wants to comment. Bud Crawford fighting the tough Felix Diaz.
I got Crawford.
Yeah, I think people would like to think it's a competitive fight, and Lord knows we need a competitive fight. After we need a palate cleansing competitive fight next weekend.
That's what
I'm not sure you're gonna see it.
That's what Joshua Klitschko is for. You can watch that again and again and again.
Well, you're right. If you watch a repeat of that, that's certainly true. But after last weekend, we're going to need something to raise our spirits, and people think it's going to be this fight. You know, Diaz, if you take a look at Diaz's resume, I'm not seeing anything there that tells me he's got what it takes to get in with the likes of Crawford. I really don't. Who's the biggest name on his resume to date? Lamont Peterson, who he lost to. Sammy Vasquez, well, he beat him in a unanimous decision, and then we saw what happened after that. Who else has he got on there? Adrian Granados is on the resume. I'm not sure I'm too impressed by the performances even against those names. Again, he's a Dominican, 33, so time is not on his side, and he's certainly not a knockout artist. He's only got 9 knockouts in 19 wins, so I do think he'll be tough. He's a tough out, and he's never been knocked out for a loss, so I will settle for good entertainment, but I'm certainly not picking him to win.
Fellas, your thoughts on Bud Crawford and Felix Diaz?
I agree with Gail in the sense that I just think, maybe in the early part as Crawford is filling out Diaz, there'll be some competitive rounds, but eventually Crawford figures out his opponent, and then that's when the big bad Crawford comes out, and he gets mean, and he has his famous quote, "Come what you're looking for."
Yep.
And
Get what
he just,
you're looking for.
he has that mean streak, and he just, I think he's proven time and time again that once he fills you out, it's a wrap.
Bo, Daniel, Gus, your thoughts?
Yeah, the thing about Felix though is Felix Diaz is a younger version of Gamboa, except he might be a little bit more technically sound, and he has that dog in him, like Crawford has that dog in him. He just has that meanness in him, like Crawford has that meanness in him. And Diaz wants to prove to everyone. Like, that's why when he took that, I think it was it the Sammy Vasquez fight. When he took that Sammy Vasquez fight, they was talking about, a second loss would be the end for him, when I thought he beat Lamont Peterson. So he had something to prove. And this is his chance to prove something in this fight also. If he beats Terence Crawford, that, he belongs. So I like the fight because this, Felix Diaz is going to bring it. Though my only question is, how would he adjust that fighting at 140? Because when we last saw him, he fought at 147. So how would this fight at 140? You know, how would he feel at 140? I don't know. I believe it's his first fight at 140. I could be wrong. So that's my only question, is fighting at 140. But I think Crawford is gonna have a kind of a similar time with him that he did with Gamboa. But Crawford showed that he has very good ring intelligence, and that might be the key factor.
Daniel and Gus, your thoughts?
It's gonna be Crawford's, like, say you want to say like tough as far as like a scrap type of fight today, because technically his toughest opponent should have been Posto, and we saw what he did to Posto. And that's a situation that I think Felix Diaz is facing. We may see a different version of what we saw with Lomachenko his last fight, where a guy will come in, he's going to try to give it his all, but he's ultimately outclassed. With Lomachenko, is just outclassed. With Crawford, it'll be, it's over once he turns southpaw. And it's a slow build-up, because I think eventually, Top Rank still has the designs on feeding Manny Pacquiao to him at 147, but is a good opponent. You can't say when it comes to Felix Diaz that he's going to be. I think the Granados fight was at 140, so it should be a decent fight. You can't say, oh, he's fighting a lightweight like they did with Hank Lundy, or even with possible they try to say, oh, he fought somebody that wasn't going to bang. It's going to be a decent fight. I'm expecting a pretty decent Dominican crowd at Madison Square Garden to show up, but Bud has built up a pretty decent fan base though as well here in New York. So he's going to be coming in as a favorite. He's finally he'll leave with a win. And if last week was any indication, he'll probably try to demand all the belts and try to go after Ndongo next, to say, like, I want to unite all the belts and then go to welterweight.
Your view of this fight, Gus. Do you think Diaz will provide a tougher test than many anticipate?
As a fighter, I think he's better than a Victor Postal, Mike. I think, and plus I think he has a better win than what anything Terence has on his record. Because I consider Lamont Peterson, significantly better than Victor Postal, and Felix was very good in that fight against a very difficult opponent, who he was able to sort of jump the distances to catch Peterson off guard and sort of outwork him on the inside as well, but then flying backwards out of range. So the problem here is, Mike, is that I would love Terence to fight with Felix in the middle of the ring, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think Crawford will implement the style which we've seen last few fights. I think he'll use his lateral movement. He'll fly around the ring negatively, and he'll pick Felix. I think he'll have to instigate the fight, try and sort of cut the distances, but that's not really what he does. And he will use his height and his reach advantage, and he'll probably pick Felix off. But as if you're the bigger puncher, I've always been taught that that you fight somebody on the inside and you get them out. You don't choose to sort of move around. So, but I personally I can't anticipate. I can't see Terence doing that. If he did that, I think it'd be a fun fight. I think he has the ability to fight him on the inside as well, which would probably be Felix's best chance. But stylistically, Mike, is going to be difficult for him. But I would love to see him win it.
I'm, key for me is what something that Bo said earlier about Diaz. That is the weight coming down to 140 when he's been fighting more at welterweight for the majority of his career. Um, can he get down to that weight comfortably? Uh, if he can, it could be a good fight, but I'm more in line with a Gus here. I think that Crawford may try to chin check early, find out that Diaz can take it. He may be able to. He probably will feel the strength of Diaz, even though Crawford is a big guy at 140 himself. And once he discovers that Diaz can probably take the punch and feel his physical strength, I think he will box, use his skill, his hand spin, and his foot movement, particularly from the southpaw stance, and win by decision here. I'm guessing 8-4, 9-3. There will be some exciting moments in there because, as Jacob noted, Crawford does have a mean streak. He will push it, but I think at the end of the day, the intelligence of Bud will take over, and he will be too much for Diaz and win by a fairly comfortable margin. And I think we're going to shut the show down on that note. I'm going to go around the panel here, around the hangout here. Ladies first, Gail from Communities Digital News. And it looks like we're going to get the show in under 2 hours. Yay! For those who want to talk the sweet science or Dancing with the Stars or environmental issues, let the folks know where they can find you.
You can find me at Communities Digital News, which is COM, C-O-M-M, Digi, D-I-G-I News, comdiginews.com. It's PR Pro on Twitter, and love to talk fights and anything else on your mind.
I'm going to Bo here from Truth and Facts About Boxing. For those who want to talk the sweet science or follow the adventures of you and your daughter, who is nothing to mess with, just ask her brothers.
Fierce.
Gave them a 1-2 and put them down to their knees. Let the folks know where they can find you, Bo. Are you there, Bo?
Got that mic muted.
Yeah, I'm there. I'm here. You can find me at Truth and Facts About Boxing on YouTube. You can also find me on Twitter at Truth_FactBox1 and Instagram at Truth_FactBox1. I also right here on Pound for Pound Boxing and the Movement podcast with my fellows 2K the God, the Gods of Boxing, Twine from Hoop Jab, my partner in crime Bernard, and Big Cool from Colossal Boxing Talk.
I'm glad the show is happening tonight. Otherwise, I would be really, really pissed at the way the Rockets just laid an egg tonight against the Spurs. That was pathetic. I'm watching that as I'm doing this live show. So yeah, this gave me a nice distraction from that. So yeah, I don't know what Houston was doing in Harden. You suspect now, sir. Going to Gus here from Corruption and Boxing for those who want to talk the sweet science or talk music. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Folks can hit me up on Corruption in Boxing, all platforms, and watch out for 2 cards from the UK. I think there's also a card from Mexico as well, Mike, on Saturday.
Yeah, it's a title shot. I want to say junior flyweight title fight, but it was just so much boxing happening on the 20th, I just couldn't get all of it fit in.
Kalyafai, I think he's fighting. Yeah, there's pretty good cards on Saturday. Yeah.
Indeed. Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing for folks who want to talk the sweet science or even talk movies. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show again, Mike, and
no problem.
And everybody on the show. And I'll do a little shout out to Bo. If I got this right, Bo, you have a couple designed apps or games. So people check that out. I think it's like zombies.
Yeah, indeed. Excuse me, Jacob, but talk about that right quick, Bo. Your apps.
It's a couple of apps that we came up. It's like we tried to come up with some child-friendly apps and time-wasting apps. They're free, of course. You download them, and it's one's like a a zombie shooting app where you shooting them, or you can run them over in the car. Another one is kind of like it's a version of Candy Crush, but it has different levels to it and different things you do differently, like bubbles and blocks and things like that. And then you can, instead of 3 in a row, you can do 7 and like diagonal type designs. And that one, then there's the basketball app. It's a hoop app where you have multiple hoops that go, so you can get 2 baskets at once or 3 baskets or whatever, or you can bounce them off the wall. Then there's it's a little space app. So we've been, creating some things. We're trying to come up with something for boxing, but that's money there. So, but yeah, that's that's something that I'm just sticking my head into, just to see how it works. Always gotta, I'm years old, so you always gotta keep your mind open for new things.
It's available in
Well,
what format?
you have a Cuban birth certificate, or that what we're saying here?
That's possible, Gail.
I'd like me one of those.
Running over zombies, man. My God, you got a disturbed mind there.
And let the folks know where those apps are available at.
Oh, you can find them, and right now they're in Google. All 4 apps are in Google, and you can go to Google Play Store and type in Apollonia Media. And yes, we came up with it. We was watching Purple Rain, and it just hit us in the head. So Apollonia Media, and it's in Google. And if you go to, we just got approved by iPhone. Who is that? Who was iPhone?
Apple.
Apple. Thank you very much. We just got approved for the Apple Store. They're more tedious. So we finally got our approval for there. So we have one of our games in there right now. And the same thing, if you go there and you type in Apollonia Media, the game will pop up.
Indeed. That's pretty dope. Back to you.
Appreciate that, Jacob. Thank you very much.
No
back
problem,
to you,
man.
Jacob, for folks who want to talk boxing or even movies, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, boxing, always love to talk boxing. And you can be found on Twitter at JRATM23. And then movies, I got a couple of movie podcasts that I'm going to be guesting on pretty soon. So, just follow my Twitter account, and I'll usually tweet about that stuff and talk to people about that.
Daniel from the Inscriber online magazine, for folks who want to talk boxing, even politics, and the NBA, specifically the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where to hit you up.
Yes, folks, you can find me at Ruckus99 on Twitter, where I'm probably now looking to see a lot of talk. Actually, we're talking about this Rockets Spurs game. The words point shaving have been coming up among NBA league executives for now.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So yeah, that was like I said, that Rockets game, that was as disappointing as Chavez's performance against Canelo Saturday night. If you want to talk the sweet science with me or music or anything else, you know what it is. Brother JR on Twitter at Brother JR76. As I said to begin the show, if you want to check out information regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, please go to the blog page, P4P Boxing Report, .wordpress.com is the link. Check the Riley page. You'll find links to the pages on Twitter, Facebook, G+, Tumblr. Also, where to listen to us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music, Player FM. Like I said, we're going to take next week off. So we'll be back in 2 weeks. And when we come back, we will do a recap of Crawford Diaz, of Gary Russell Jr., his fight against Escandon, of Uzcategui, Dirrell, of Tanaka, Acosta, Gervonta Davis, his bout over in the UK and London against Liam Walsh, as well as Rances Barthelemy. And we will do a preview of highly anticipated welterweight showdown between Kell Brook and Errol Spence. That fight is happening in Sheffield. Preview of that bout. So 69 in the books and done. Community's digital news. For Gus from Corruption in Boxing, the facts about boxing. Jacob from Jab Hook. I'm your host, Michael. We will see you guys next week. Everybody have a good evening. Good night.
Good night.
See ya.
Good night.
Bye bye. Cubans are the greatest.